Do you have a sec?
No.
Now, I don't know why, but it's showing it reversed. There's YouTube Live, Studio Live.
Okay.
It took me a little bit to get there, but I did.
All right. So we should do
But I don't have any.
setting.
Yep.
Little off this. Flip the other way.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
So is it recording? Is it recording now?
Usually on YouTube, when it streams, it's recording.
Okay,
So-
but it's not live over the internet.
Yeah, it is live right now. So what, if you were at the Timbercrest YouTube channel right now, this is what you'd be seeing.
We'll go up and see if we have sound. Where will it show up?
Do you have YouTube on your phone?
I do.
Yeah, I can hear it. I don't quite know. Oh, I did. I had to shut some stuff down. No, the boss is fill in like the title, and I just put that. Okay. So, okay. You know, that, there's a new version that comes up with a couple things on it. Okay, fill it, yeah, fill it in. So we're not using the OPS at all. This is all on the line. Okay, well, good. Okay, so we can play with it some more. That, yes, I'll do that.
All right.
Stan?
Yep.
Pretty good. Good for you. Good afternoon. I'm Marilyn Kieffaber. I work here at Timbercrest part-time, back in healthcare in Crestwood most of the time. I know most of you, many of you. I want to say thanks to Brian Daniels for playing the piano for us. Stan Notzinger was here earlier, working on the sound and the camera and all those things, which we've had some difficulty with. But anyway, I'm hoping I'm coming through, and maybe you can even see me, I don't know. Today is January 5, 2022. This is the 12th day of Christmas. Yesterday afternoon in Crestwood, we sang that song, The 12 Days of Christmas. Do you remember? On the 12th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 12 lords a-leaping, 11 ladies dancing, 10 pipers piping, 9 drummers drumming, 8 maids a-milking, 7 swans a-swimming, 6 geese a-laying, 5 gold rings, 4 hummingbirds, 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree. Okay, well, that's enough of that frivolity. Tomorrow is Epiphany, when we celebrate the wise men giving their gifts to the Christ child. I decided to wear my Christmas clothes one last time. So, Merry Christmas a little bit late. Happy New Year a little bit late too. This is the first week of our new year. Brian played the beautiful hymn, This is the Day of New Beginning, before we began. So I'd like us to try singing it now. It's on page 640 of the Blue Hymnal. This is the day of new beginnings, time to remember and move on, time to believe what love is bringing, ready to rest the faith and hope. For by the life and death of Jesus, God's very Spirit now has turned, caring for us, who in friends as they hope are born again. And let us with the Spirit daring step from the past of leaving on. Our innocent morning with guilt and grieving, seeking Him and sure to find. Rise in the time and goes before us, who shall share what love can do. This is the day of new beginnings, our unsaving all brings true. I chose a scripture to read this morning. Very seldom would I choose a scripture from Revelation. But today, there is a scripture from Revelation that I think is very appropriate for us now. Chapter 21, verses 1 through 5. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and He will dwell with them, and they shall be His people. And God Himself shall be with them, and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. There shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. For behold, I make all things new. I'm going to read you a story, actually a couple of stories this afternoon. Most of you know me know I'm a story person. Before I read you this first story, I want us to think together about the idea of holding on and letting go. How do we let go of things we need to and hold on to other things that sustain us? We at Timbercrest have experienced lots of letting go. Material things and other, even more important and difficult things to let go. Our parents, other family members and friends, and especially, for many of us, dearly loved spouses. you a story that's based on the true experiences of more than one person. It's called Letting Swift River Go, the wonderful picture book, written by Jane Yolen and illustrated by Barbara King. I wish I could show you the lovely pictures which go along with this story, but use your imagination as I read. Jane Yolen wrote an introduction to the story. She says it's an author's note at the beginning. The Guava Reservoir is near my house, one of the largest bodies of fresh water in New England. It is a lovely wilderness. Eagles soar overhead, and deer mark out their paths. But once, it was a low-lying valley called the Swift River, surrounded by rugged hills. There were towns in the valley, filled with hardworking folks whose parents and grandparents had lived there all their lives. Then, between 1927 and 1946, all the houses and churches and schools, the markers of their lives, were gone forever under the rising waters. The drowning of the Swift River towns to create the Guava was not a unique event. The same story, only with different names, has occurred all over the world, wherever nearby large cities have had powerful thirst. Such reservoirs are trade-offs, which, like all trade-offs, are never easy and never perfectly fair. When I was 6 years old, the world seemed like a very safe place. The wind whispered comfortably through the long branches of the willow by my bedroom window. Mama let me walk to school all along the winding blacktop, past the old stone mill, past the Grange Hall, past our church, not even meeting up with Georgie Warren or Nancy Vaughn till I reached the crossroads. Georgie and I fished the Swift River in the bright days of summer, catching brown trout out of the pools with a pin hook and a bit of thread. We played mumbly peg in the graveyard and picnicked on Grandpa Will's stone, the black one that stayed warm all day by soaking up the hot summer sun. And many a summer night I slept out under the backyard maples with Nancy Vaughn. We listened to the trains starting and stopping along Rabbit Run, their long whistles blowing in the dark, startling the screech owl off its perch on the great elm. Lying there looking up at the lengthening shadows of trees, we'd see the fireflies winking on and off and on. One night, Nancy Vaughn and her cousin Sarah from the city brought 3 mason jars to my house. We caught fireflies in them, holding our hands over the open tops. Mama came out to watch. She shook her head. "You have to let them go, Sally Jane," she said to me. So I did. In the deep winter, Papa harvested ice from Greenwich Lake, and Mama kept the stove going in the house all day and all night. I slept under 3 eiderdowns and Grandma's quilt. Later in March, we put buckets up on all the maples, dipping our fingers down into the sap and tasting the thin sweetness. But then, everything began to change. The men went to the Grange Hall time after time after time. The women, too. Only nobody asked us kids. They all listened to men from Boston because the city of Boston, 60 miles away, needed lots of water. Boston had what Papa called a mighty long thirst, and no water to quench it. We had water here in the valley. Good water, clear water, clean water, cold water running between the low hills. We could trade water for money, or water for new houses, or water for a better life. So it was voted in Boston to drown our towns, that the people of the city might drink. First, we moved the graves, Grandpa Will's black stone, and the Doubledays, and the Downings, and the Metcalfs, and the Halls. Papa read the headstones on the trucks as he helped gather the small remains, hauling them to the new cemetery, where everything would be fresh and green. Sometimes all the men found were buttons, or teeth, or a few thin bones. Papa said they left the Indians where they lay. No one wanted to bother them, but I thought it was right that they remained in sacred ground. The black flies were fierce, Papa said, fierce. He had whites under his eyes, swollen like tears. Then the governor sent his woodpeckers to clear the scrub and brush, to cut down all the trees, the maples and the elms, the willows and sycamores, and the great spreading oaks. They were stacked like drinking straws along the roads, then hauled away. Our houses came next. Some were bulldozed. One great push, and they went over after 1 or 2 centuries of standing strong against wind and snow and rain. Georgie and I watched them push down the old stone mill. So the windows of one wall stared out like empty eyes at the far-off hill. Mr. Baxter's house went by truck along the blacktop to a new home in another town, slow as any child going to school. Nancy and I ran alongside for a ways, but it had more breath than we did. We stopped, panting, and watched it till it was out of sight. Then Mama and Papa and I moved away to New Salem, one big hill over, and into a tiny house where my room was warm all winter long. Nancy and her folks went to the city to be near her cousin Sarah. I never heard where Georgie went. I never even got to say goodbye. Strangers came with their big machines, building tunnels and caissons, the Windsor Dam and the Goodenough Dike. Papa brought me over to watch most Friday afternoon. You've got to remember, Sally Jane, he said, and remember our town. But it didn't seem like our town anymore. There were no trees, no bushes, no gardens, no fences, no houses, no churches, no barns, no halls. Just a long, gray wilderness, just a hole between the hills. The waters from the dammed rivers moved in slowly and silently. They rose like unfriendly neighbors halfway up the sides of the hills, covering Dana and Enfield, Prescott and Greenwich, all the little Swift River counties. It took 7 long years. Much later, when I was grown, Papa and I rode out on the Guava Reservoir. Behind us, we left the bubble trail. Through the late afternoon and well into the evening, we sat in the little boat, and Papa pointed over the side. Look, Sally Jane, he said, that's where the road to Prescott ran. There's the road to Beaver Brook. There's the spot the church stood where we had to be baptized, and the school, and the Grange Hall, and the old stone mill. We won't be seeing those again. I looked. I thought I could see the faint outline, but I could not read the path. now owned those streets, and bass swam over the country roads. A rainbow trout leaped after a fly, and the water rings rippled through my father's careful mapping. When it got dark, the stars came out, reflecting in the water, winking on and on and on, like fireflies. I leaned over the side of the boat and caught the starry water with my cupped hand. For a moment, I remembered the wind through the willows, the trains whistling on Rabbit Run, the crossroads where I had met Georgie Warren and Nancy Vaughn. Gone, all gone under the water. Then I heard my mother's voice coming to me over the drowned years. You have to let them go, shouted Jane. I looked down into the darkening deep, smiled, and did. Sometimes it's hard for me to read those last few words without choking up. The young woman in the story has so many memories of her lost childhood home. And she faces the challenge of letting go of regret and sorrow and holding on to precious memories of the past. What things have you had to let go? And what things are you holding on to? As we think back over our lives, I'm sure that there are many things to think of. Some are little things because the world has changed so much. Most of us have let go of accepting letters in the mail, even as we have learned to rely more on phone calls, and for some of us, email or text or Zoom calls to keep in touch with those in a distance. Some things we're glad to let go of. For us women, we're glad to let go of nylon stockings with seams we tried to keep straight. Remember those? Other things are hard to let go of. Hopes and dreams that have not been fulfilled and will never be for ourselves, or may never be for ourselves, our children, and our grandchildren. I'm going to end with another very short little story, which is really terrible. It's one of several small stories contained in the picture book called Zen Shorts by Jonathan. Just listen. This little story is called A Heavy Load. Two traveling monks reached a town where there was a young woman waiting to step out of her sedan chair. The rains had made deep puddles, and she couldn't step across without spoiling her silken robes. She stood there, looking very cross and impatient. She was scolding her attendants. They had nowhere to place the packages they held for her, so they couldn't help her across the puddle. The younger monk noticed the woman, said nothing, and walked by. The older monk quickly picked her up and put her on his back, transported her across the water, and put her down on the other side. She didn't thank the older monk. She just shoved him out of the way and departed. As they continued on their way, the young monk was brooding and preoccupied. After several hours, unable to hold his silence, he spoke out. That woman back there was very selfish and rude, but you picked her up on your back and carried her. Then she didn't even thank you. I sent that woman down hours ago, the older monk replied. Why are you still carrying her? What are you carrying that you need to let go? Anger, regret, guilt, grudges of one kind or another where you've been wrong? If it's a big thing, then the only way to stop carrying it is through forgiveness sometimes of yourself as well as others. Not necessarily because the other person needs to be forgiven, but to free you from carrying those bad feelings so you can hold on to the good things in your life. Let's end with a prayer. Dear God, help us to hold on to the knowledge of the many blessings we've been given. Help us to do the hard work of letting go from all that we have lost. Our loved ones, knowing they are held in your loving hands. Our hopes and dreams that cannot be fulfilled. Our anger and bitterness and so many things we have experienced. Help us to be free to live with the knowledge of your unfailing love and thankfulness for all our many blessings. Amen.
Sorry, it was too much on the shirt. You're welcome. That's a little when I first heard it, I thought, it's not like the ones back there.
Hi, Jenny.